The naval base was alive with routine. Boots hitting the floor in sync, officers barking orders, cadets scrambling to meet schedules. In the middle of all this movement, there was one person who moved silently, almost invisibly. She wore no rank, no medals, no nameplate, just an old blue janitor uniform and a tired face that no one really looked at. She cleaned the halls where orders were given. She swept floors where national defense was planned. To them, she was just the cleaning lady, but she watched everything, silently. Years had taught her the art of being unnoticed. That's how she wanted it. Until one afternoon when everything began to change. It was a hot afternoon when Officer Liam Carter was rushing down Corridor B to deliver a sealed report to his commander. He was new, still learning the ropes, often stumbling with military protocols. As he turned the corner, he almost ran into the janitor. The woman staggered back slightly, clutching her mop. "Sorry, ma'am," Liam said, trying to move past her quickly, but then something caught his eye. As she adjusted the sleeve of her uniform, a faint tattoo became visible just for a second. It wasn't an ordinary tattoo. It was a tactical unit mark, one only granted to deep combat operatives, the kind of mark you earn after years of life-threatening missions. Liam blinked, and it was gone. The woman lowered her sleeve calmly and gave him a polite nod. "Be careful running through corners," she said and turned away. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He kept replaying that symbol in his head. His father was a veteran, and he had taught him enough about unit markings to know this one wasn't common. In fact, it was almost never seen anymore. It belonged to an elite unit called Phantom Echo, disbanded after a classified mission failed. Nearly 20 years ago, he pulled out an old military handbook from his drawer and flipped through it until he found the unit. Phantom Eco status, lost in action. No photos, no names, just a short line. All operatives presumed dead. He tried to brush it off. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe it was just some old ink. But the next day, he saw her again. This time she was cleaning near the memorial wall, where pictures of fallen soldiers were displayed. She moved slowly, carefully, wiping each frame with gentle hands. Almost like a mother touching her child's photo, Liam stood at a distance, watching her. She paused in front of a black and white photograph of a group of soldiers in battle gear. Her fingers lingered near one man in the picture. She whispered something, but he couldn't hear what. Then she turned and noticed him. "You again?" she said, not surprised. "Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Just passing by," he stammered. She gave a small smile, but her eyes were unreadable. "Sometimes things lost are not really gone," she said, then turned back to her cleaning. That sentence hit him hard. Things lost are not really gone. What did she mean? Was she talking about the photo? About the unit? About herself? He couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a janitor. That night, Liam took a bold step. He sneaked into the base archive, pretending to be following up on a training assignment. Once alone, he accessed the old digital files. Most Phantom Echo records were locked, but he found one entry, a codename, Raven 27. No photo, no rank, just the last known location, Operation Black Valley. Status presumed KIA. Killed in action. Raven 27, that was her. He was sure of it. The way she moved, the scarred hands, the quiet confidence. And that tattoo. He printed the record and brought it to his senior, Lieutenant Marshall. "Sir, I found something strange," he said, handing over the paper. Marshall read it and looked up sharply. "Where did you get this?" "The archives, sir. It was just I saw the janitor. She had this mark on her arm. I think she was part of this unit." The lieutenant's face changed. He stood up, walked over, and closed the office door. "Burn this paper," he said quietly. "Forget what you saw." "But sir," I said, "forget it. Carter, this file is under blackout protocol. Never bring it up again." Liam walked out of the office more confused than ever. But he couldn't just forget it. Something was wrong, and he was now part of it. The next day, she wasn't on base. No one knew where she went. Probably took a day off, someone said, but Liam knew better. He checked the janitor's log. No leave requested. Her ID card hadn't scanned in or out. She was just gone. He looked at the security footage from the previous night. It showed her walking toward the memorial again. At exactly 11:04 p.m., she stood there, staring at the same photo. She placed a small piece of folded paper on the frame and walked away. Rushed to the wall, hoping it was still there. It was gone. Cleaned, wiped, erased. But he noticed something odd. The glass had a faint fingerprint near the corner. The same corner her hand had rested on before. He leaned in closer, and for a second he imagined he could hear her voice. "Things lost are not really gone." The next morning, the base was tense. The Admiral himself arrived without warning. Admiral Knox, a man known for silence and strength, walked straight to the command center. "Where is she?" he asked coldly. "Who, sir?" Marshall replied. "Don't play games with me." "The woman in the photo, Raven Vinch." Such a silence filled the room. "I don't know where she is, sir." "She disappeared last night," Marshall answered. The Admiral turned to Liam. "You're the one who saw her first." "Yes, sir." "Did she say anything?" "Just one thing. She said we leave things behind, but they're never really gone." Admiral Knox lowered his gaze. He looked like he had been punched in the chest. "Find her now." "But she..." Didn't want to be found. Across the town, in a quiet shelter for veterans, she sat on a bench looking at the sky. Her hands shook slightly as she unfolded an old photograph. Her unit. Phantom echo. 12 men and women. All smiling. All believed. Dead. She touched each face one by one. She didn't cry. She never cried. But inside her, the weight of years pressed hard. She had survived. They hadn't. And the man who had left them behind was now one of the highest in command. She had hidden for too long. It was time. That night, she returned. She walked onto the base without using her ID. She didn't need it. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. It was as if the place remembered her. Her steps led her to the Admiral's office. Guards tried to stop her. She didn't even look at them. "I'm here for him," she said, voice firm. Admiral Knox stood as she entered. His face went pale. His lips moved, but no words came. "You left us," she said. "You left me. And then you buried the truth." Knox couldn't speak. He looked at her as if seeing a ghost. "You knew we were still breathing, but it was easier to let the world think we were dead. What do you want?" "From me?" he finally asked. She pulled up her sleeve. The mark was there. "Raven 27, I want you to remember." And with that, she turned and left, leaving behind a silence more deafening than any explosion. Knox sat down, shaken, as though his entire past had been pulled from its grave. But this was only the beginning. Because tomorrow, the world would hear her name and her story. The truth was coming and it wouldn't be quiet. The sun was just rising over the naval base, casting golden light on the empty parade ground. A heavy stillness hung in the air. Everyone was talking about the strange woman who had walked into Admiral Knox's office the night before and left without a word to anyone else. No one knew her name. No one knew her rank. Some didn't even believe she was real, but the Admiral did. He hadn't spoken since that moment. He canceled all meetings. He sat alone in his office with the door locked, staring at the walls. As if the ghosts of his past had come to life and stood before him. Officer Liam Carter stood outside the Admiral's office. He'd heard the whispers. Some said she was dead. Some said she had returned to finish something. But Liam only remembered, her eyes calm but powerful, like someone who had seen more than any human should and still kept walking. He had questions, so many questions, but he knew the Admiral wouldn't answer them. Not yet. So Liam went to the one place where stories hide, the storage archive room below the old barracks. It was dusty and forgotten, filled with boxes no one had opened in years. With a flashlight in one hand, he moved past shelves labeled with missions, timelines, and names. Some boxes were sealed with red tags classified. Others had faded ink and missing labels. He found one box with the tag, Black Valley Debrief, incomplete. He opened it. Inside were photographs, some ripped, some scratched, pages of mission logs, maps with red circles, and in the middle a videotape labeled, Helmet Communit Raven 27 Final Entry. His heart beat faster. He looked around. No one was there. He found an old tape player in the corner, plugged it into a dusty socket, and pressed play. The screen lit up, snow, then chaos. A video showed a burning village. Explosions, screaming voices, heavy breathing. A woman's voice came through the static, calm, commanding. "Unit Echo, pull back to Grid 9. We'll hold the north flank." The camera turned. For a second, the face of a young soldier came into view, then the screen shook, violently. The voice came again. "They lied to us. We're not getting airlifted. We hold until 0 hour." Then everything went black. The screen froze. Liam stared at it. The mission was never meant to be one. They were never supposed to return. He put the tape back in the box, sealed it, and left the archive. His hands were shaking. The Admiral had buried this. He had left those soldiers behind, but one had survived, and now she was back. Meanwhile, across town, the woman Raven 27 sat, inside a quiet veteran's shelter, sipping tea slowly. Her fingers trembled, but her eyes were steady. Across from her sat a man in a wheelchair, eyes sunken, beard unshaved. His name was Marcus Raywins, a sharpshooter in her unit. Everyone thought he'd died in Black Valley, but he hadn't. He had just disappeared like her. "I saw the boy," she said. "The young officer, he's digging." Marcus nodded. "He reminds me of Caleb," he muttered. She flinched at the name. Caleb had been the youngest in their unit. He didn't survive the last hour of Black Valley. "It's time. Marcus, we have to speak." Marcus looked down at his hands. "They'll shut us down before we start." "Not if we speak where the world is listening," she replied. That afternoon, Liam walked into the communications department and found Officer Jenna Miles, his closest friend. "Jenna, I need your help," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You look like you saw a ghost." "I think I did," he replied. He showed her the sealed file, the unit logo, and told her everything: the woman, the tattoo, the mission. Jenna listened carefully. "And you want me to do what?" "I want access to the broadcast room. I think she's going to speak. I think she wants the world to hear her." Jenna sighed. "Liam, this is dangerous. You're touching things way above your rank." "I know, but you've seen the memorial wall. You know how many names have no stories. What if this is one of them?" Jenna hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, you get her in the room. I'll make sure the mic works." That night, Raven 27 returned to the base once more. But this time, she wasn't hiding. She wore her old uniform, not the janitor's outfit, but the original combat gear. It still fit her barely. Some medals were scratched, others missing, but on her chest, the Phantom Echo patch remained. She walked down the halls, and this time, people stopped and stared. Some saluted out of instinct. Others simply watched in confusion. She walked into the broadcast room with Liam by her side. Jenna was already there, adjusting the mic. "We're live in 60 seconds, she said. Raven didn't blink. She sat down, looked into the camera, and waited. The red light turned on. Across screens all over the base and later, across the country, a woman's voice began to speak. "My name is classified. My face is forgotten. My story was buried. I was part of Unit Phantom Echo. We were sent into Black Valley 20 years ago. They told us we were saving lives, but they sent us there to die. The mission was a lie. The airlift was a lie. We held the line. We lost brothers, sisters, friends. The last order I gave was to hold the north gate until sunrise. I carried the last wounded soldier on my back until my legs gave up, and then I watched the helicopter fly away without us. We were called missing, in action, but we were left behind. I survived. So did one other. We lived in silence, because we were told the truth would hurt the nation." She paused. "I'm done being silent." The camera cut. Chaos followed. Commanders stormed the room. Alarms rang. Jenna was arrested. Liam was pulled away by security. Raven was surrounded, but she didn't fight. She stood up, raised her hands, and said, "The truth is out now. You can't erase it again." At that very hour, in Admiral Knox's office, the old man sat staring at the live footage. His hands were cold. He reached for the photo on his desk, the same unit photo she had touched. His fingers hovered over her image. "I told them it would destroy us," he whispered. Then he opened his drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. It had one word written in bold, "Confession." But before he could open it, the phone rang. He answered. "Sir, the press has picked it up. They're calling it a betrayal. They want your statement." Knox didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the screen, now showing Raven 27 being taken away. "She warned me," he said softly, but the storm had only just begun. Outside in the holding cell, Raven sat alone. The walls were cold. The bench was hard, but her back was straight. Her eyes were steady. She had broken 20 years of silence. She had stirred a nation. And in the silence of that room, she smiled, because she knew the truth had a voice now, and it had just begun to speak. The silence in the evidence room was thick, almost suffocating. The man in the military jacket stood frozen, his fingers still clutching the classified box labeled Black Valley. His eyes locked on the shadowy figure gripping his wrist. Ray, the forgotten sharpshooter, alive and standing, no longer in the wheelchair everyone thought he needed. His expression was cold, unreadable, like someone who had seen too much and trusted no one. The man tried to speak, but Marcus squeezed tighter. "If you were really loyal to the uniform," Marcus said, voice calm but sharp, "you wouldn't be here sneaking in the dark." The man pulled away and stepped back. "You don't understand, Marcus. If this box goes public, it won't just destroy the Admiral, it'll bring down the whole chain of command. Everyone who signed off on Black Valley, the Senate, the Defense Committee, even foreign allies." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You think she doesn't know that? You think she waited 20 years to whisper the truth and then walk away?" He stepped closer, his voice lower now. "She came to finish what they didn't let her start." Before the man could respond, 2 security guards entered the room. The lights turned on fully. Marcus let go of the man and backed away, raising his hands calmly. The guards looked confused. "We got a report about movement in the archive room," one said. Marcus pointed to the man. "Ask him what he was doing with classified evidence." The guards looked at each other and turned to the man in the jacket. "Sir, can you confirm your authorization?" But the man was already walking out, pretending not to hear. Marcus didn't stop him. Not yet. Later that morning, Admiral Knox stood at the window of his office, looking out at the flag waving high in the wind. His face was pale, his hands behind his back. He had watched the footage. He had heard Raven's voice, and now the walls around him felt like they were closing. A quiet knock came at the door. "Come in," he said. It was his assistant, holding a folder. "Sir, the press is calling again, and there's a growing protest outside the base. Veterans, mostly. They've seen the broadcast." Knox nodded slowly. "And her?" he asked. "She's still in holding. She hasn't asked for a lawyer. Hasn't spoken since last night." The Admiral walked to his desk, opened the drawer, and pulled out the envelope labeled Confession. He stared at it, then placed it on the desk and sighed. "Tell them, I'll speak today noon, in the assembly hall." Meanwhile, Raven sat in the holding cell with her back against the wall. The room was cold, but she didn't shiver. She had waited for this moment for years. She wasn't afraid of what came next. Across from her, Liam Carter stood quietly, watching her through the glass. His eyes were full of questions. She noticed. "Do you want to ask something?" she said finally. He nodded. "Why now? Why not 10 years ago, or 15? She leaned forward. "Because I made a promise. I told Caleb I'd tell his mother what happened, but she died 2 weeks ago." I didn't keep that promise in time, so I made a new one. I'll tell the world. Liam sat down beside the glass. I saw the video, the helmet cam. You were leading the unit. You gave the last order. Her eyes softened. It wasn't an order. It was a goodbye. She paused. They knew we wouldn't survive. They planned it that way. One mission to clean up a mess they created. No witnesses, no survivors. Liam whispered, but you survived. She smiled faintly. And now I'm a problem. At noon sharp, the assembly hall was filled. Officers, cadets, commanders all seated, waiting. Press crews had been allowed, in under strict rules. Cameras rolled. Microphones clicked on. Admiral Knox stepped onto the stage. His voice was calm, but the tension in the room was thick. 20 years ago, a mission was launched under the code name Black Valley. It was labeled classified, deemed necessary for national security, and eventually closed without public knowledge. The soldiers sent into that mission were declared missing in action. Today, I confirmed that was not the full truth. Gasps echoed across the hall. The admiral continued, Raven Vinci Secchi, once a commander in that unit, survived. So did another. I confirm her identity and her story, and I accept full responsibility for remaining silent all these years. One of the reporters shouted, so you lied to the country. Knox didn't flinch. Yes, and I will carry that burden for the rest of my life. Another voice yelled, what happens now? He looked down at the crowd and said, now, the truth has to rise above rank, above politics, above fear. He stepped down from the podium and walked away without taking questions. Back in the cell, Raven heard the news. Liam brought her the press release. She read it slowly, then looked up. He finally said it. Liam nodded. What now? She stood up. Now I speak freely. Within hours, she was released from custody. The base was divided. Some saw her as a hero, others called her a traitor, but none ignored her anymore. As she walked through the main hallway, a young cadet saluted her. Ma'am, he said, eyes full of admiration. She stopped. What's your name? David Keller, he said. My uncle was in Phantom Echo. He never came home. She looked at him, pain flickering in her eyes. Then I owe you an answer. Later that evening, Raven returned to the broadcast room, this time by invitation. The entire nation was watching. TV screens across homes, offices, and cafes tuned in. She sat before the camera once more. My name is Raven 27. I do not speak for vengeance. I speak for memory. I speak for the soldiers who were left behind, not just in Black Valley, but in many forgotten corners of history. We wear the flag, we take the oath, but sometimes, we are used and erased. She continued, voice steady. They said we were missing, but we were abandoned, and those who survived were told to stay silent. Not anymore. I don't want medals. I don't want revenge. I want names remembered. I want truth documented. I want families to know what really happened. She paused. And I want those who made the decision to erase us to face the light they so carefully avoided. When the broadcast ended, the reaction was explosive. Protests surged across cities. Veterans came forward with their own stories. Journalists dug into classified missions. A senator named Howard Raines was called out by name in one leaked memo. He had signed the approval for Black Valley with full knowledge of its risk. Marcus met Raven at the back of the base chapel the next day. You started a war without weapons, he said. I started a truth they couldn't hide anymore, she replied. Are you ready for what's coming? He asked. No, she said honestly. But I'm not hiding anymore. The next morning, Liam received a plain brown envelope at his desk. No return address. Inside were photos, actual combat photos from Black Valley, taken by an unseen camera. One showed Raven carrying 2 wounded soldiers. Another showed her standing alone, rifle in hand, facing the enemy line. At the bottom of the envelope was a single note. This story isn't over. More are still alive. Liam froze. More survivors. He rushed to find Raven, but she wasn't on base. She was gone again. Only this time, she left something behind, a handwritten list with 5 names. Each, one crossed out, except the last one. Subject 6, location unknown. Rain fell gently over the mountain valley, drenching the quiet trees and darkening the earth. In the middle of nowhere, far from the noise of bases, barracks, and breaking news, stood a small wooden cabin with no number, no mailbox, and no welcome mat. Inside that cabin, a man sat alone at the edge of his bed. His eyes were fixed on an old photograph. The edges had curled, and the ink had faded, but he could still see every face clearly. 12 people, smiling, armored, alive. Phantom Echo, his unit, his family, his ghosts. The voice from the phone still echoed in his ears. It's Raven. They know now, but they need you too. He hadn't heard her voice in 20 years. Not since the last radio call from the mountain. Not since the sky turned red, and the promise of rescue was replaced by silence. They told him everyone had died. They told him there was no one left. But now she was back. His name was Eli Torres, codenamed Ghostline 6, the sniper who vanished after Black Valley. Officially, he'd been listed as Mio, presumed dead. But Eli had lived, hiding deep in the mountains of Montana, far from systems and secrets. No military, no government, no contact. Until today. He walked to his closet, opened the hidden compartment behind a stack of firewood, and pulled out a metal case. Inside were his old gear, still preserved the Phantom Echo patch, his military ID, his worn-out dog tags, and beneath them a single photo of Caleb, the youngest in their unit, the one they had all sworn to protect. Eli had failed him. They all had. He dialed Raven's number. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I'm sure," she replied. "Caleb didn't die, like they said. There's more, and it's bigger than Black Valley." Eli closed his eyes. "Then I'm coming." Back at the base, Liam Carter was staring at the list Raven had left behind. 5 names were crossed out. Each one belonged to someone from Phantom Echo, confirmed Kia. But the 6th name had no details. Just one note beside it: status, unknown. He called Jenna, who had been quietly helping him dig through old databases since the broadcast. "Jenna, I need you to run a trace on all known Phantom Echo members. Cross-reference with mission locations, confirmed remains, and post-mission surveillance." She hesitated. "You're talking about files above top-secret clearance?" "I know," Liam replied. "But if Raven's right, and someone is still out there, we need to find them before someone else does." Jenna nodded. "Give me 24 hours. Meanwhile, Raven met Marcus in a nearby safe house, not government-owned but protected by ex-military allies who believed in her cause. She stood by a window, watching the city lights in the distance. "They're spinning it on the news now," Marcus said, scrolling through his phone. "Some call you a whistleblower, some call you a traitor. They're digging up your past, even your family." Raven didn't move. "They can dig as deep as they want. There's nothing left to bury." He looked at her. "And what if they come after you?" She turned to face him. "Then they'll learn I'm not just someone who survived, Deem, someone who remembers." At that moment, the door opened, and a man stepped in wet from the rain, older than before, eyes heavy with sorrow. Eli Torres. Raven didn't speak at first. She just walked over and hugged him. After all these years, no rank, no uniform, no orders, just shared silence. Pain, survival, family. Marcus nodded in respect. "We're almost whole again." Eli looked at them. "Not yet. Caleb's gone, and we don't know what really happened to him, not until we find the 6th name on that list." Liam called Raven that night. "I think I found something." His voice was fast, urgent. There was a medical report filed 2 weeks after Black Valley, classified under civilian trauma cases, but buried under fake names. A teenager pulled from the mountains, severe burns, memory loss, no ID. He was sent to a private hospital in Colorado. The doctors labeled him as John Doe, unidentifiable. Raven froze. How old? 17 or 18. No family claimed him. He disappeared from the system 5 years later. No record after that. Raven's voice cracked slightly. "Send me everything." The next morning, Raven, Eli, and Marcus sat around a table with the files Liam had forwarded. The image wasn't clear, but something in the shape of the jawline, the eyesette, reminded Raven of Caleb, but it wasn't certain. "Could be him," Marcus said, "but he had a scar under his left eye. From the accident in training." Eli zoomed in. "It's hard to tell with the damage." Raven whispered. "He was the youngest, the one we swore to keep safe. And if he's alive, ... Eli added. "Then, someone has him, or he's working for someone." Marcus frowned. "Why vanish from the system 5 years later, unless someone took him?" That's when Jenna called again. Her voice was shaking. "I just intercepted an encrypted email. It's between 2 people in the upper command chain. They're tracking someone referred to as Subject Zero, a potential threat with battlefield conditioning, psychological damage, and no identity." "Guess where the last location ping came from?" Raven asked. "Washington, D.C. Military Research Division." Everyone fell silent. Eli finally said what no one wanted to. "They didn't just leave Caleb behind, they kept him." The team prepared to move. Raven called Liam. "If we vanish, don't come after us, but keep the story alive." Liam replied firmly. "I'm not staying behind. You need someone on the inside. You need someone to keep the light on when they try to shut the world out." Raven smiled faintly. "You remind me of someone," Liam replied. "Let me guess, Caleb." She didn't answer, but her silence said, "Yes." That night, as rain poured over the quiet streets of D.C., a man walked into an underground lab. His eyes were calm, his face clean-shaven. His ID badge said Technician Level 3, but he wasn't a technician. He was watching the security feed. On screen 4, a young man in a black hoodie was sitting alone in a dimly lit room. No handcuffs, no chains, just silence. The technician typed on his terminal. "Subject 0, confirmed awake. No movement, no communication, no aggression." He clicked submit. In the room, the young man blinked slowly. A scar sat under his left eye. Suspenseful ending of Part 4. Raven. Eli and Marcus arrive in D.C. using old contacts and false identities. In a dark alley near the lab facility, they meet a former medic who once worked inside the military's secret recovery program. He hands Raven a photo taken 6 months ago, fuzzy, but clear enough. A young man walking alone at night near the facility gates. Raven stares at the photo. Her hands tremble. "It's him," she whispers. "It's Caleb," Marcus asks. Then what now? She looks up now. We bring him home. The air in the training yard was dry and tense. Nayla's boots hit the dusty ground with silent resolve. Each step she took echoed memories that never truly left her. The recruits around her were shouting, sprinting, struggling, and she stood among them as their quiet storm. Ever since the incident with Commander Tariq, things had shifted. Whispers followed her. Respect clashed with suspicion, and the Admiral hadn't spoken to her since the moment his eyes had locked onto her. Scarce, but it wasn't silence that hurt her most. It was the way people started to look at her like she was both legend and question mark. Lieutenant Zara approached her during a rest break, handing her a bottle of water. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low. "You didn't sleep last night, did you?" Nayla took the bottle but didn't answer. The nightmares had returned, this time more vivid. The cold walls, the flickering light, the echo of boots in a hallway where she once screamed and no one answered. She forced herself to stay silent. Zara sat beside her. "You know," she said, softly, "you don't have to prove anything. What you did on the deck, the way you disarmed Tariq, that was enough." Nayla turned to her, her eyes sharper than usual. "It's not about proving anything. It's about remembering why I'm still breathing." Later that afternoon, the Admiral finally called her in. His office was cold. The air conditioning hummed, yet Nayla felt warmer than ever. She stood stiffly at attention, as the Admiral, seated behind his large desk, studied her. "I've received intel," he said slowly. "There's a joint mission between our fleet and the UN Maritime Recovery Unit, and they've requested you personally." Nayla blinked. "Me, sir." He nodded. "They know who you are. Your records were supposed to be classified, but someone leaked part of your file." Nayla's fists clenched at her sides. "I didn't approve the leak," the Admiral continued. "But now that the information's out, you'll have to choose. Either go public under controlled narrative, or decline and disappear from the program." The silence that followed was long and heavy. "Why me?" she finally asked out. The Admiral sighed. "Because the mission site is exactly where your unit went missing all those years ago." Nayla's knees nearly gave way. "You'll be flown to the southern coast, near Sector 9. That's where I know where it is," she said, voice almost a whisper. "I remember every inch." As she left the office, her thoughts spiraled. Sector 9 was where it had all started, where her old team had vanished, where she had been captured, where she endured the torment she never spoke of. She didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, Zara came to her bunk. "You're really going back there?" Nayla nodded. "Then I'm coming too." Nayla didn't argue. 3 days later, the ship approached the Sector 9 ruins. The area had been deemed cursed by sailors and abandoned years ago after multiple patrols failed to return. On board the ship, the UN officers briefed the group. Sonar picked up a submerged structure. "Looks military, but not on record. No heat signatures, no movement, but something feels off." As they descended in the small submersible, Nayla kept her eyes on the murky waters. She could feel it like an echo calling her back. The deeper they went, the heavier her breath became. Then she saw it, the jagged steel outline of the structure. The same doors, the same rusted chains. Her heart stopped. They docked and entered. The corridors inside hadn't changed. The flickering lights, the claw marks on the wall, the metallic stench of forgotten blood. Her knees almost buckled when she reached a hallway that had haunted her dreams for years. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where they kept us." Zara looked around, unsettled. "There's something wrong with this place." As they explored deeper, they found cells still locked, empty. But one door was half open. Inside a journal, water-stained pages, half torn. Naila picked it up with shaking hands. She flipped through it. It was her own handwriting. Her journal, the one she used to keep secretly during the captivity. She had believed it lost forever. Her breath caught. One page stood out. "They took a deal, said he knew something. I heard screams for hours. I begged them to take me instead. They laughed." Zara read over her shoulder. "Who's Adia?" Nayla didn't respond. The truth had waited long enough. "Adia was my brother," she whispered. "We joined the academy together. He got captured before me. I followed the trail to rescue him, but I was too late." Zara's eyes widened. "You never mentioned I buried it." "Because I couldn't live with the guilt." Suddenly, a creak echoed in the hallway. The sublights flickered. Then a voice crackled on the intercom. "Team A, return to extraction point. You've got incoming movements. Something's still active down there." The group rushed back, but Nayla hesitated. "I'm not leaving until I find proof of what happened to Adil." Zara tried to stop her. "Nayla, this is suicide." But Nayla pushed forward, deeper into the rusted maze, following memory like a compass. She reached a heavy steel door, one she remembered, fearing more than death. Inside, she found it. A tattered uniform, her brother's name still stitched on the chest, and next to it, a sealed file marked Experiment Number 42, Volunteer turned Traitor. She opened it. Her hands shook. Inside were photos, interrogation records, medical notes. A single, chilling entry stood out. Subject refused to speak, refused to betray his team, unusable for extraction. Eliminate and dump remains. Nayla fell to her knees. Silent tears rolled down her face. He hadn't betrayed them. He had died protecting them. She grabbed the file and uniform, stormed out. and rejoined the extraction team. No one spoke. No one dared ask what she had seen. Back on the ship, she collapsed in Zara's arms, holding her brother's uniform tightly, and just when she thought the day couldn't hold more pain, the Admiral's voice came through the radio. "Nayla, we need to talk." Immediately, she barely had strength to reply, but what he said next chilled her blood. "We recovered a partial audio log from the facility before you disconnected. Naila ... Someone was still alive in there, and they called your name." Nayla's heart stopped. "Whose voice was it, sir?" The Admiral hesitated. It was a Rain was pouring outside the hospital window when Arya woke up. Her side was still bandaged from the training incident, but she didn't care about the pain. What hurt more was the silence. Nobody from the base had come to visit her, not instructors, not the cadets, and certainly not the Admiral. Only Dr. Lin had stopped by that morning to check her vitals and bring her some hot tea. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of rain tapping on the glass. A memory from her past came rushing back, the sound of rain against a tent in the jungle. Her father treating wounded soldiers under a plastic sheet, and little Arya handing out bandages with trembling hands. She had learned strength through suffering, but this silence, this cold, empty silence, felt worse than war. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. To her surprise, it was Cadet Juno, the same one who once laughed at her during drills. She stood awkwardly, holding a bag of fruit. "I didn't know if you'd want visitors," Juno said, clearing her throat. "But I thought you might need someone to talk to." Arya raised an eyebrow. "Why the sudden concern?" Juno looked down. "I watched the security footage from that training field. I saw how you shielded the others from the blast. That wasn't luck. That was training. You knew what was coming. You saved my life." Arya's expression softened slightly. "You were worth saving." Juno sat beside her. "I've been stupid. We all have. We treated you like you didn't belong here. Like you were too old, too different. But you've proven more than any of us." Arya gave a half smile. "Sometimes, you have to bleed for others to see your worth." They sat in silence for a while, until Juno asked, "Why are you here? Why join the academy at your age? I mean, what are you really running from?" Arya took a deep breath. "I'm not running. I'm finishing something." She told her the story of her brother Liam, how he joined the Navy when they were young, how he died in an ambush overseas, and how the military had buried the truth. Arya had promised her family she wouldn't let Liam's name be forgotten. She joined the academy not just to serve but to uncover what really happened. Juno listened, eyes wide. "Does the Admiral know?" Arya's jaw tightened. "He knew Liam. They served together. But every time I ask, he shuts me down." That afternoon, word spread across the academy that Arya had visitors. One by one, cadets began showing up. Mateo brought her a book she loved. Priya brought her a letter signed by nearly all the first-year cadets, apologizing for how they had treated her. Some even asked her for advice on hand-to-hand combat. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. 3 days later, Arya was cleared to return to duty. Her walk back to the barracks felt different. People didn't look away anymore. Some nodded, some saluted. Others just stepped aside and let her pass. But the coldest reception came from the top. When Arya reported to Admiral Hawthorne's office, she expected at least a word of acknowledgement, but he didn't look up from his desk. "You were reckless," he said. "I was decisive," Arya replied. He slowly looked at her. "You put yourself between the blast and your team. They're my responsibility." "And who told you that was your place?" His voice was cold. "My brother," she answered. The Admiral froze. Arya stepped closer. "You served with Liam, didn't you?" "I don't speak of the dead," he said, his voice suddenly shaky. "Then maybe it's time you started." She placed a photo on the desk. It was faded. 2 soldiers in uniform, standing beside a tank, smiling in the sun. Liam was one of them. The other was a much younger Admiral Hawthorne. "You promised my family you'd protect him, but he died, and nobody ever told us how." The Admiral looked at the photo, and for the first time, Arya saw something crack in him. Not anger, not arrogance, but pain. "I watched him die," Hawthorne whispered, "and I've lived with that every day since." "Then why shut me out?" "Because I failed him," the Admiral said. "And when I saw you, I saw him. Same stubbornness. I thought if I kept you down, if I broke you early, you'd walk away before history repeated itself. But you didn't break me," Arya said, her voice low. Hawthorne stood slowly and walked to a cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a Liam's file and handed it to her. "There's more in here than you know, but once you open it, there's no going back." Arya took the file, her hands trembling. "There's nowhere else I need to go." That night in the quiet of her bunk, she opened the folder. There were classified mission logs, letters, and photos, and a single sealed envelope addressed to A.H. Arya opened it and began to read. It was written by Liam, in his final days, words about courage, brotherhood, and a warning. A mission that had gone wrong. Orders that came from above. And a truth that was buried to protect powerful names. Arya's breath caught in her throat. Brother hadn't just died. He had been sacrificed, and the man who ordered it was still active in the Navy. Just then, the lights in her room flickered. She quickly tucked the papers under her mattress. She looked toward the door. Someone was there. A soft knock. She stood up cautiously. Who is it? No answer. She opened the door slowly. No one was in the hallway. But on the floor was a piece of paper. One line was scrawled across it. Stop digging, or you'll end up like your brother. Arya stood in the silence, the weight of truth in her hands, and the chill of a new threat settling in. This wasn't just about the past anymore. It was war. Arya sat on the edge of her bed, the warning note still clutched in her hand. Her mind was spinning, but her hands were steady. She had seen death before, but this was something else. This was someone telling her that truth wasn't welcome, that asking questions would cost her everything. But instead of fear, something else was rising inside her resolve. She gently folded the note and placed it inside her boot. She wouldn't throw it away. It was proof. A message from the shadows. They were watching, and they were afraid. The next morning she wore her uniform with more pride than ever. She tied her boots with purpose, pinned her rank badge to her chest, and walked out of the barracks like a soldier who had already survived war. On her way to the mess hall, several cadets stepped aside for her. Even the ones who once whispered behind her back now gave her silent nods of respect. She wasn't just one of them anymore. She had become something they admired even if they didn't understand her fully. At breakfast, Cadet Juno approached her again. I heard someone left something outside your door, she said quietly, sitting beside her. You okay? I'm fine, Arya replied without looking up. Sure, I've had worse thrown at me than paper. Juno was quiet for a moment, then she leaned in. I want to help. Arya finally looked at her. Help me do what? Whatever you're doing, Juno said. You're not just here to become a soldier, there's something else, something bigger, and I think it's time you let someone in. Arya hesitated, but Juno had proven herself. She had stopped mocking. She had started listening. Maybe she could be trusted. That night, they sat together in the training yard under the moonlight. Arya handed Juno a copy of Liam's last letter. As Juno read it, her face turned pale. This is huge, she whispered. If this is real, someone in the top ranks buried a mission. Your brother knew it. And they silenced him. Exactly, Arya said. What are you going to do? I need proof. Real proof. More than a letter. I need the mission logs, the communication records, something I can't get from here. Then, you need someone on the inside. Arya nodded. And I know just the person. The next morning, Arya went straight to Dr. Lin's office. The old physician was filling out reports when she walked in. He looked up, eyes warm but weary. Back. So soon? He asked. I need your help, she said. Dr. Lin leaned back in his chair. Help with what? You worked with my brother. You were there after the mission. His eyes darkened. That was a long time ago. You owe him, Arya said, quietly. He trusted you? Lin rubbed his hands together, then stood and walked to a locked cabinet. He pulled out a small box and placed it on the table. Inside was a USB drive. This has encrypted medical reports and mission injuries from that year. I've kept it hidden. Never submitted it to Central Records. I knew someday someone would come looking. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I didn't think I'd survive it, Lin said honestly. But if you're willing to carry it forward, then take it. Arya held the drive like it was a lifeline. Think, but be careful, Lin said. The people who buried this, they don't forgive, and they don't forget. Arya left his office and returned to her room. Juno helped her plug in the drive and begin decrypting files. What they found made both of them go silent. There were records of soldiers with injuries that didn't match the official mission report. There were scans of bodies marked with burn signs of chemical weapons, and worst of all, there was a log of a decision made hours before the mission began. The route and delaying backup, the name authorizing it was redacted, but the initials were there. DM Juno read aloud. Do you know who that is? Arya stared at the screen, her throat dry. Darren Morrow, Rear Admiral Morrow. He's still active. High Command. He's the one who gave the final order that day? Juno looked stunned. He buried it. He sacrificed them. And if you take this public, Arya nodded. I'll be the next one buried. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the hallway. Someone was knocking no pounding on the door. Arya and Juno froze. Open up. This is internal security. Juno yanked the USB from the laptop. Arya shoved it into her sock and quickly locked the computer. Hide it. Arya whispered. The door burst open before she could even step away. Two armed officers stepped in, followed by a man in a black uniform. Captain Rourke, from Internal Investigations. His face was cold and unreadable. Cadet Arya Vale, he said, you are under investigation for accessing restricted military files and unauthorized data possession. Stand down. Juno stepped forward. She hasn't done anything wrong. Rourke ignored her. Take her. The officers grabbed Arya's arms, but she didn't struggle out as they led her away. She glanced at Juno and gave her a look not of fear, but trust. Juno understood. They took Arya to a secure room below the administrative building. No windows, just white walls and a metal table. They left her there for hours. No questions, no food, just silence. Finally, the door opened. Admiral Hawthorne stepped in. He looked exhausted. He sat across from her and took a long breath. What were you thinking? He asked quietly. I was thinking about my brother. He's gone. He deserves justice. You're playing with fire, Arya. She stared at him, then let it burn. He didn't speak for a while. Then he slid a folder onto the table. "This is your expulsion form," he said. "All it takes is my signature." "And what will you tell them?" she asked. "That you expelled a cadet for asking why her brother died?" "No," he said. "I'll tell them you compromised base security. Then you'll be lying." "I've done worse." Arya leaned forward. "Do it then. But I still have the files. And if anything happens to me, they'll go public." He stared at her. "You don't scare easily. I learned from the best." For the first time, something like respect flickered in the Admiral's eyes. He stood, but didn't take the form. Instead, he said, "Be at the parade grounds tomorrow at dawn. Uniform pressed, boots clean." She frowned. "Why?" "Just be there." And he left. The next morning, the entire academy gathered at the parade grounds. The sun hadn't even risen, but everyone was in full dress. Arya stood in the third row, unsure what was happening. Then the Admiral walked onto the stage, microphone in hand. "This academy was built on courage," he said. "And sometimes courage means more than following orders. It means standing for truth, even when it's dangerous." He paused, then looked straight at Arya. "There is one among us who did just that." A murmur spread through the crowd. He nodded. Toward her, Cadet Arya Vale stepped forward. She hesitated, then stepped out of the row. He turned to face her. "Your brother was a good man. He died doing the right thing. You've done the same, and that will not go unrecognized." He pulled out a Medelan old silver badge and pinned it to her chest. "Valor, under fire," he said. "Even if the fire comes from within." The cadets applauded. Some even cheered. But behind the clapping, Arya knew this wasn't over. Somewhere in high command, Admiral Morrow was watching, and soon, he'd make his move. As the sun rose over the academy, Arya looked into the crowd and saw Juno, smiling with tears in her eyes. But then she saw something else. A man in a black coat at the edge of the field. He wasn't clapping, he was watching, and in his hand was a phone. The Admiral stood in front of the sea-facing window, his hands behind his back, lost in thought. The gentle hum of the waves couldn't calm the storm brewing inside him. It had been 2 days since Aisha's open testimony in the Academy Hall, days since she bared the wounds they all ignored. The silence that followed her speech still echoed in every corridor of the base. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to feel. But everyone felt something. In her small barracks room, Aisha sat quietly on her bed, staring at the metal that once belonged to her father. The light from the window caught its surface and bounced softly off the walls. It was more than a metal. It was a memory, a promise, a scar. The past had always lived within her, but now it was outside, for the world to see. And it was heavy. Just then, a soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said gently. The door opened slowly, and to her surprise, Commander Fahim entered. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood 3 Rabia and Hussein. Their eyes weren't the same as before. They held something else, now not pity, not confusion, but something that almost looked like respect. "Aisha," Fahim began, "we want to talk. May we?" She nodded and moved to the side to let them in. The room was small, barely enough space for 5 people to stand comfortably, but they didn't care. What mattered was the silence that followed once the door closed. "We were wrong," Rabia said, her voice low and sincere. "We thought you were quiet because you were weak. We didn't understand what you were carrying." Ion stepped forward. "The day you spoke, it changed everything. I went back and read about your father. What happened to him? What happened to you after he died? It's not something we should have ignored." Aisha looked at them, her eyes unreadable. "You don't have to say anything. I never wanted anyone to feel sorry for me." "It's not pity," Hussein added. "It's shame. Shame that we never stood by someone who stood through a storm alone." Fahim placed a folder on her bed. "This is from the intelligence archives. Classified documents about your father's last mission. The Admiral sent it to me. He wants you to see it. You've earned the right." Aisha's hand trembled as she picked up the file. The seal was old but intact. She opened it slowly, each page turning like a key unlocking a locked door in her soul. Her eyes scanned the lines. Operation Seaglass, her father's last operation. The mission everyone said was a failure, but the documents told a different story. Her father didn't abandon his unit. He didn't make a mistake. He followed orders given by someone else. Someone above. A political decision, a sacrifice. Her father took the blame to protect others. He chose silence over truth, honor over self-defense. Her lips parted in disbelief. "They lied," she whispered. "All this time, they knew. They let him die with shame. And now they know you know," Fahim said quietly, "which means things are going to move." Before she could respond, the base alarm buzzed. A low vibrating siren filled the air. It wasn't a drill. It was the real thing. Fahim's eyes sharpened. "We need to move." Within minutes, the cadets were in formation. The Admiral himself appeared on the main deck. His face was pale, but his voice firm. "We have an unauthorized aircraft approaching restricted waters. Interception team, Alpha, will mobilize. We believe this may be connected to the breach we reported last week." Aisha stood in line, unsure if she was supposed to move. She wasn't on Alpha team. But then, the Admiral's eyes found hers. Cadet Aisha, he called. She froze. You're with Alpha today. A murmur ran through the line. No one questioned, not after what had happened, not after her story. Aisha stepped forward, helmet in hand, her mind racing. As they boarded the helicopter, Ion leaned close. Looks like the Admiral wants you. Tested? Or silenced? A voice in her mind whispered. The wind howled as the chopper soared into the sky. Aisha stared at the radar screen. A small dot blinked, near the outer zone. An old signal, no communication, no response, just silence. The commander in charge gave a sharp order. Prepare for drop. We'll investigate from the southern cliff. Be ready. The team descended near the cliff's edge. Ropes swinging, boots hitting stone. The sea beneath was violent, the wind sharp. Aisha scanned the horizon, her senses alert. Then she saw it. A black speck on the water, not a plane, not a boat. Something else. Half submerged. Metallic. It's a pod, she shouted. Ejection pod, possibly military. The team moved closer. Aisha led, her instincts firing. They reached the object. It was scorched, damaged, and sealed. She moved to open it, but a hand stopped her. Fahim, you don't know what's inside, he warned. I have to know, she replied. She pressed the release panel. With a hiss, the pod opened on inside. Wrapped in a silver thermal blanket was a man, barely conscious, breathing, military tags around his neck. But it wasn't just any man. It was Lieutenant Commander Adil Qureshi declared. Dead 8 years ago. Aisha's knees buckled. She had read his name in the files. He was her father's second-in-command. And the man who disappeared the same day her father died. Adil Qureshi alive, and now staring straight at her, his lips parted. And he whispered something only she could hear. It wasn't your father's fault. They made us lie. Before she could ask more, he slipped into unconsciousness. They rushed him back to the chopper. The flight back was silent. No one dared speak. The truth was unraveling faster than they could catch it. Back at the base, Adil was rushed to the infirmary. Aisha was called straight to the Admiral's office. He stood alone, the same sea behind him. I didn't expect this, he said. You lied, Aisha replied. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. You lied about my father. You let everyone believe he failed. The Admiral turned slowly, his face older than before. I followed orders, just like your father did. Then what now? She asked. He sighed. Now we face consequences, but do we tell the truth? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to a locked drawer and pulled out a small box. He placed it in front of her. She opened it. Inside was a medal, not her father's, hers. For courage and silence, the inscription read. Tears filled her eyes. You want me to accept this? After all this? No, he said. I want you to decide what comes next. Speak or stay silent. The choice is yours now. And as she held the medal in her hand, a single thought echoed in her heart. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Zainab sat on the edge of the hospital bed, staring at her hands. They trembled slightly, not from fear anymore, but from the storm of memories she had finally begun to unleash. The hospital's white walls couldn't hide the scars of her past. She had exposed her deepest wound to Admiral Harris, and now everything had changed. News of her scars, her courage, and her mysterious connection to a covert military operation had begun to swirl through the ranks like wildfire. Colonel Reed entered the room quietly, carrying a thick brown file and a look of conflicted respect in his eyes. He had always kept his distance from Zainab, seeing her as a fragile civilian in a world built for discipline and silence. But now, he knew better. He had watched the footage from the Admiral's private debrief. He had seen her sit, tears threatening but never falling, as she explained what had happened that night at Fort Resilience 10 years ago. Zainab, he said gently. She looked up. I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me. She nodded, her face still pale but steadier than ever. I've already started walking back into the fire, Colonel. You can ask. He pulled up a chair, opened the file, and slid a photograph toward her. It was black and white, slightly faded. In it, 3 young women in uniform smiled awkwardly in front of a hangar. Zainab's breath hitched. One of them was her, and the other, Tasha and Lieutenant Afio, were the ones who hadn't made it out. You were part of Operation Ashline, Colonel Reed said carefully, but your name was never in the reports. In fact, all records of you were redacted. Zainab's hands clenched. That's because I wasn't supposed to be there. I was just, maintenance. Just a background tech. But I found something I wasn't supposed to. He leaned in. You uncovered something classified. She nodded slowly. I found encrypted flight logs routes that didn't make sense. They were smuggling weapons through humanitarian airdrops. Tasha was the pilot. She didn't know. Either when we confronted them, they made it look like we went rogue. Afia died on the spot. Tasha, they made her disappear. Colonel Reed was silent, stunned. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was history buried alive. Zainab stood up now, her voice gaining strength. I escaped. But not before they hurt me. Not before they tried to erase me. The colonel slowly closed the file, and now I want it to stop, she said, her voice trembling with fury. No more hiding, no more ghosts. Later that night, Zainab was escorted under heavy guard into a confidential meeting room. Sitting across from her was Admiral Harris, again his face pale, drawn, but different this time. The anger had been replaced with something heavier, guilt. He cleared his throat to Zainab. I wasn't supposed to know you were alive. The men behind Operation Ashline used me as well, but I can help you now. She looked at him, wary but listening. Help me? How? There's one man who orchestrated the whole thing, General Marcus Vale. He's retired now, living quietly in the countryside, but he was the one who signed the orders to silence your team. If we bring him in, everything might come undone. Zainab's heart pounded. She had heard that name only once whispered in fear by Afia the night before she died. Marcus Vale had always been the shadow behind the curtain. I want to see him, Zainab said, her voice steel. Not as a soldier, as the girl he tried to break. Admiral Harris sighed. It won't be easy. He's protected, and you'll need proof more than just a story. Something physical. Something that connects you directly to the operation. Zainab opened her hand slowly and unwrapped a cloth she had kept hidden in her jacket. Inside it was a rusted dog tag with a broken chain and faded initials. AV, it was from that night. Taken in the chaos, I kept it, she whispered. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. The Admiral looked at it like it was a burning coal. That could do it. Just as things started aligning, the base alarms suddenly wailed. Red lights blinked through the corridors. An officer burst in, eyes wide. Sir Zainab's room has been ransacked. Someone tried to steal the dog tag. They knew exactly where to look. Zainab clutched the chain tighter. Her eyes narrowed. They're watching us, she said, and they're scared. Suspense built thick in the air as she turned to Admiral Harris. So now what? He met her eyes. Now we go to Marcus Vale, and we make the past speak no matter what it costs. But unknown to them, in the surveillance room, a shadowy figure was already deleting files, erasing traces, and sending one chilling message to an unknown number. She's getting too close. Permission to terminate? And the reply came seconds later. Not yet. Let her lead us to the others. The storm was far from over. Zitha van rolled through the dense woods of Vermont, crunching over gravel and leaves as the late evening sun dipped behind the hills. Zainab sat in the back seat, her eyes locked on the dog tag still wrapped in cloth in her hand. Beside her sat Colonel Reed, unusually quiet in the front. Admiral Harris rode beside the driver, scanning every tree, every clearing, like a man who knew what it meant to be hunted. They were heading toward a secluded farmhouse, General Marcus Vale's private estate. The military couldn't touch him publicly. Too many secrets, too much history. But Zainab didn't come for headlines. She came for answers. As they neared the property, the van slowed. Reed leaned toward Zainab. This is it. No security at the front. But don't let that fool you. He'll have protections, just not the kind you can see. Zainab nodded, slipping the cloth-wrapped tag into her jacket pocket. Her body felt electric. Every breath, every heartbeat reminded her. She was walking toward the man who tried to bury her alive. They got out quietly. The farmhouse was surprisingly ordinary. White shutters, a wraparound porch, flowers blooming along the railing. It didn't match the image of a man who had once signed death orders like autographs. But power, Zainab knew, always wore a mask. Admiral Harris stepped forward and knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open. An elderly man in a faded green sweater appeared, holding a walking cane and staring blankly for a moment, then his eyes sharpened. John Harris, he said, cold and amused. Didn't expect you to come knocking like a salesman. Let us in, Marcus, Harris said, firm but calm. We need to talk. Vale's eyes flicked to Zainab. Something flickered in his face. He stepped aside. I only talk where no one listens. They entered the warm wooden living room. A fire crackled in the corner. Reed stood by the door, alert. Zainab stayed silent as Harris spoke first. You remember Operation Ashland? You remember the girls? The ones who tried to report the arms route you signed off on? They were silenced. One escaped. Vale's eyes didn't move. Those files were classified. You have nothing. Zainab stepped forward. I have this. She pulled out the dog tag and placed it gently on the coffee table. The room froze. Vale's eyes widened. For just a second, he looked human, frightened. This belonged to Afia, she said. She died because she trusted the system. Tasha disappeared, and I survived because you underestimated me. Vale's jaw clenched. You're lying. You don't know what you're saying. Admiral Harris stepped forward. The chain of command stops here. Marcus, either you cooperate or we go public. The press, the war tribunal, your legacy, they'll all know. Vale chuckled suddenly. A low, bitter sound. You think you can scare me with headlines? You don't know who's still in play. Zainab looked at him, calm but unblinking. Then you tell us, or I'll knock on every door in D.C. with this tag in my hand. Silence. Finally, the old man stood up, walked slowly to a bookshelf, and pulled out a thin black file. He tossed it on the table. This is what you want, he said, the truth. But the truth won't protect you. In fact, it might kill you. Zainab picked up the file with trembling fingers. Inside were names, Ignatius, orders, flight plans of items that directly connected her team's deaths to covert weapons deals routed through military aid missions. This is what they died for, she whispered. Vale didn't flinch. I signed the orders, but I wasn't the one who gave them. Harris narrowed his eyes. Then who? Marcus's lips curled into something between regret and fear. You ever hear of Echo Division? The room went still. Reed stepped forward. Echo Division was shut down years ago. No, Vale whispered. They just changed their name. Zainab felt the weight of the file in her hand. Denu runs them now. Before Vale could speak, the power went out. The entire house plunged into darkness. A split second later, a shot cracked through the night. A window shattered, and Reed grabbed Zainab and dropped to the floor. Sniper, he shouted. More shots followed. Harris pulled Vale to the ground as two masked men burst through the back door. They were fast, tactical, no insignias, no names. Professionals. Zainab crawled toward the fireplace, yanking down the poker. Reed wrestled with one of the intruders while Harris fired back at the second with a sidearm he'd hidden under his coat. In the chaos, one of the masked men reached for the file, but Zainab kicked it away and slammed the poker across his face. Blood spattered the floor. Then came the sound of sirens. Reed had managed to trigger the silent alarm. The attackers backed off and vanished into the trees. Silence returned. But the house was a mess. Blood, broken glass, splinters of wood. Zainab stood in the center of it all, holding the file close to her chest. Her breath shook. Now they know. We're coming, she whispered. Reed limped to her side. We're not done yet. We've got the evidence. Now we go up the chain. Admiral Harris checked on Vale, who had a graze wound but was otherwise alive. They were willing to kill to stop this, he said grimly. But we're going forward. Zainab looked out the shattered window into the darkness. The past had found her. Now she was coming for it with the truth in her hands, and nothing left to lose. But outside, in the black SUV parked far beyond the trees, a man in a suit spoke quietly into a phone. She has the file, he said. Initiate Phase 3. And the voice on the other end replied, bring her in alive, if possible. Zainab sat in the quiet corner of the safe house's underground war room, her fingers trembling slightly as they held the worn, black file that had already cost lives. Across from her, Colonel Reed patched up a shallow wound on his arm while Admiral Harris spoke in hushed urgency on a secure line, trying to arrange a temporary extraction. The attack at Vale's farmhouse had confirmed one chilling truth: whatever was behind this wasn't working alone, and they had eyes everywhere. Vale, now under heavy protection in the adjacent room, had gone strangely quiet after the assault. He hadn't spoken a word since he muttered Echo Division before the shots rang out. Zainab's mind kept returning to those words. Echo Division wasn't just a ghost. Operation It was still active, alive in the shadows, with more power than anyone imagined, and she had just put herself directly in their crosshairs. Zainab leaned over the table and opened the file again. Photocopies of original documents. One read, Human Asset Clearance Group ZR9, to be terminated under Op Shadow Hawk. The date matched the day her team had been ambushed all those years ago. Another document bore a list of signatures: General Marcus Vale's. Yes, but also names she didn't recognize. Yet one name was circled in red ink. J.L. Cormack. Admiral Harris returned and sat across from her. You found something? He said, seeing her pale face. J.L. Cormack, she whispered. Does that name mean anything to you, Harris? Blinked. His lips tightened. Then he exhaled deeply and leaned forward. James Langston Cormack. He used to be my superior during the Coldwater years, when Echo Division was real. He was one of the most ruthless tacticians we ever had. Disappeared off the books years ago, after the unit was supposedly dismantled. But if his name is in this file, it means he's not just alive, he's still operating. Zainab leaned back, the weight of it settling over her like concrete. He gave the order. Reed stepped in, wiping blood off his forearm. Cormack was a ghost, a strategist who turned on his own to protect operations. Some say he built a private military ring after retiring from official service. No one ever found proof. Well, Zainab said, holding the file up, now we have it. Harris nodded grimly. If we go after him, there's no going back. You'll be hunted. Not just by soldiers but by the government trying to pretend he doesn't exist. I was already hunted, she replied quietly. But now I know who gave the order to end my life, and the lives of those I loved. I won't stop. Harris looked at her with something like pride. Then we do it together. But we move now. I've traced one of Cormack's shell companies. He's based out of a private compound in Colorado. He's expecting silence. Let's give him thunder instead. The next morning, before the sun rose, they boarded a private aircraft under new identities. Zainab wore a military jacket again, not a uniform, but a symbol. She wasn't the scared girl who crawled out of a ditch anymore. She was the woman who'd survived, who'd endured, and who had the truth in her hands now. The flight was silent. Reed slept lightly. Harris reviewed satellite images. Zainab stared at the clouds and thought of Afio, her laughter, her singing, the way she covered Zainab with her body that night as the bullets fell. She thought of Tasha, whose fate was still a mystery, and she thought of the people who called her worthless in that courtroom, the ones who refused to see her scars. They touched down just before dusk. A 4-mile trek through pine woods took them to the edge of a tall concrete wall. Hidden in the trees, Harris used a drone to scan the area. The compound beyond was sprawling surveillance towers, armed guards, in black gear, and a central building shaped like a bunker. "This is no mansion," Reed muttered. "This is a fortress." "We're not here to storm it," Harris said. "We're here to expose it." They waited until nightfall. Then, under the cloak of darkness, they infiltrated the perimeter through an underground storm tunnel Reed had located from blueprints. As they crawled through the narrow space, Zainab's heart pounded. Every sound felt like a gunshot. Every movement echoed with the memory of the ambush. But she didn't flinch. At the far end of the tunnel, Reed pushed open the rusted grate, and they emerged behind a parked supply truck. They moved quickly, staying low, until they reached the bunker. Harris pulled out a device and scanned for signals. "There," he said. "Level 2. Main server room. That's where the data is." "And Cormac?" Zainab asked. "Most likely in the upper wing. Guarded." They split. Reed and Harris moved toward the server room while Zainab crept up the back staircase toward the upper wing. The hallway was lined with marble, like a government building, but the silence was dead. As she reached the 3rd floor, she found a door half open. Inside, bookshelves, maps, old photos of men in uniform, and sitting in the middle of it all, in a leather chair, was a silver-haired man in a pressed suit. His eyes lifted slowly. "So," he said, as if greeting an old guest. "You finally made it." Zainab froze. She knew this voice. The same calm voice she remembered through the static of that old comms transmission the day her unit was ambushed. "James Langston Cormac," she said. "Zainab Faruqi," he replied, like he was pleased. "You've done well. Most don't even make it past denial. But you dug up the bones. Impressive." "You ordered our deaths," she said. "I preserved the mission," he said flatly. "You were a liability. You were never meant to survive. And yet, here you are, carrying ghosts." Zainab stepped forward, her fists clenched. "You destroyed everything, Afiatasha Ramatha. Weren't threats. They were soldiers, humans, and you erased them for money." "You think war is about morals?" Cormac said, standing now, calm and unaffected. "War is about utility. I chose what kept the gears turning. You don't like it? That's your weakness." Zainab pulled out the file and dropped it on his desk. "You signed these," she said, "and the world's going to see them." Cormac looked at the file without touching it. "That's what you think? You think a few pages will undo everything? You think truth changes men like me?" "No," Zainab said, her voice sharp. "But it changes people like me." Cormac's hand moved toward a drawfast. But Zainab was faster. She slammed her knee into his chest, knocking him back. As he hit the ground, she pinned his hand and yanked the drawer open. A gun. She emptied the magazine and tossed it aside. "Nice try." Downstairs, an alarm blared suddenly. Reed's voice came over. "We're compromised. Get out now." Zainab didn't hesitate. She yanked a flash drive from Cormac's desktop and bolted. Behind her, Cormac roared in fury but didn't follow. She raced down the stairs as guards began to swarm. Harris fired 3 rounds and yelled, "This way." They sprinted through a back corridor and burst through a side door into the forest. Bullets chased them. Zainab dove behind a tree, clutching the flash drive to her chest. Reed threw a grenade, and the explosion bought them 5 seconds. Just enough. A black chopper descended in a clearing, summoned by Harris's backup signal. They leaped inside. As the helicopter lifted, Zainab looked down at the compound burning behind them. Reed looked at her. "You got it." She nodded. "Everything." The night wind whipped her face. Her eyes burned. But for the first time in years, she felt something return. Not vengeance. Not pain. Purpose. And far below, in the bunker, Cormac sat bleeding from the lip, staring at the empty desk. He picked up a phone. "They got the files," he said. The voice on the other end answered coldly. "Then we initiate phase final." Cormac smiled faintly. "Let the girl burn." But this time Zainab wasn't alone, and she wasn't afraid. The courtroom was full, and yet a heavy silence filled the air. Every person present could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The Admiral sat straight, his face blank, but his fingers trembled slightly. Maya stood in front of the witness. Boxer scars were no longer hidden, and neither was her truth. Everyone had seen the wounds, but now they would hear the full story. And this time, no one could turn their face away. The judge leaned forward. "You may continue." Maya looked at the judge, then at the jury. Her voice was calm, but each word felt like a hammer against the wall of lies built around her. "The man who destroyed my childhood sits in this courtroom. He wears medals. He commands respect, but he gave me nightmares that never ended." There was a gasp from the crowd. Reporters wrote faster. Cameras clicked in the background, but no one dared interrupt her. Maya continued, "I didn't come forward to destroy a man's career. I came forward so no one else has to suffer in silence." The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to show final evidence recovered from Naval Archives. Suppressed medical records and testimonies varied for over 2 decades. The screen lit up. It showed scanned pages, all bearing official seals, signatures, and long-ignored truth. Among them was a medical report from when Maya was 16. Bruises noted, trauma symptoms written, but dismissed under training accident. Maya watched the screen, Her hands clenched. The Admiral's lawyer tried to interrupt. Objection. This is emotional manipulation. The judge banged his gavel. Overruled. Let the truth speak. Then came the final piece, the suppressed video. A grainy security clip from a storage room in the naval base. It showed Maya, young, cornered, and the Admiral walking in. Though there was no sound, the aggression in his movement and her attempt to escape made everything clear. Maya turned away. She had already lived it once. She didn't need to watch it again. The courtroom was stunned. The Admiral's face had turned pale, not just from fear but from the shame that now clung to him like chains. He stood up, as if to protest, but the room wasn't with him anymore. Even his own officers looked down. One woman from the jury began crying. A man whispered, "My God, how did no one see this before?" The judge turned to the Admiral. "Do you have anything to say?" The Admiral cleared his throat. "I have served this nation for 40 years. Did you ever serve her?" The judge interrupted, pointing to Maya. The Admiral looked at her, but Maya's eyes were strong. No more fear, only truth. The jury left the room to deliberate, but everyone already knew the verdict. Maya stepped outside. The sky was cloudy, but light still pushed through. General Harris walked toward her, the same general who had helped her stand in the first place. "You did it," he said. "No," Maya replied. "We did it." Cameras surrounded her. Reporters asked questions. Maya didn't hide anymore. One journalist asked, "What would you say to young girls who are afraid to speak up?" Maya looked into the lens. "Speak, even if your voice shakes. Speak, even if they try to silence you, because truth has a voice, and one day it's louder than fear." The judge returned, the jury followed. The final verdict was read. On all counts guilty, the courtroom erupted in emotions. Some cried, some clapped. The Admiral's shoulders dropped. The gavel hit the desk. Justice was done. Later that night, Maya stood by the sea. The same sea that once reminded her of pain, now felt like freedom. Her younger brother walked up. "You think Mom would be proud?" Maya nodded. "I think she's smiling from above." He smiled. "What will you do now?" "I'll help others. Speak, I'll make sure no more girls get buried in silence." The next day, Maya received a call. The Naval Academy wanted her to return not as a student, but as a guest speaker. They wanted her to speak to the new generation of officers about honor, courage, and truth. She walked into the same auditorium where she was once ignored. This time, the applause was loud, real, from hearts that understood what she had done. As she stood at the podium, a slide behind her read, "Survivor, Soldier, Truth Teller." She looked at the cadets. "I was broken once, not anymore. Remember, this rank means nothing without character, and wounds can turn into strength if you let truth lead the way." Tears filled many eyes. Young women saw hope. Young men saw responsibility. Maya had not just spoken. She had changed something. That evening, she walked along the dock. The sun was setting. Her past was behind her. Her truth had set her free. And now, she was ready for what came next. Because she was never just a passenger in life. She was always the one steering the storm.